Hello, and welcome to the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute's Value Added Marketing Series. My name is Jason Robinson, Director of Business Development for Food with AURI. Our mission is to accelerate the expansion of the agricultural economy by empowering expanded uses and markets of agriculturally derived products. Today, we have Luke Cahill, CEO of Real Insight, a Minnesota-based consumer research and insights agency helping brands win at the shelf. Over the next few minutes, Luke and I will discuss the importance of effective consumer research and idea validation for value-added agriculture businesses. Luke, welcome to AURI's Value-Added Marketing Series. Why don't we get started by having you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jason. Excited to be here. So I am CEO, but my preferred title is Nerd in Chief. So I go real nerdy when it comes to research and consumer insights. This is a second generation business. So my dad started it and I joined him about 18 years ago now. And he got his start by working with farmers. And so it's kind of a fun full circle moment for me to be here talking with you today. But I've spent over 1,000 days in stores with real shoppers, seeing behavior and just better understanding kind of what's driving that. And we've, as a company, integrated more psychological and behavioral economics principles to understand kind of what's happening in human brains that then is being manifested and happening kind of before our eyes in these real environments. But grateful to have that real life experience and understanding kind of within context what ultimately drives decision making and trying to make that accessible when it comes to helping our clients, and in this case, your audience.
As you describe it, well, what is consumer research and why is it important?
Yeah, well, ultimately what consumer research is understanding more about who you're trying to market to, who are they as people, and what do they do when it comes to behavior that drives ultimately that desire, that want, and that purchase. So it's important because it's really important to get outside of ourselves and into the minds of our customers or our potential customers and answer questions like, is this product actually meeting an unmet or undermet need? Is this solving a real problem? Is it clear that this great product is in fact a great product in solving a problem that I have as a consumer? Or ultimately both in developing the right product and positioning it for success. So it starts by generating something that has value, and then the other piece is communicating that it has value in a way that is easy for a consumer, somebody who hasn't studied this, who hasn't thought hours and hours and days and weeks and weeks and maybe years and years about this particular idea. How do you translate all that goodness into the speed at which consumers kind of think and process information in a noisy environment, because there's a lot of products out there.
So in a sense, it's about validating the idea with the people who are going to actually use what you're creating as a business.
Yeah, I think it's both refining an idea to get it optimized for the audience, then ultimately making sure it can tell that data-driven story to have the impact you want as you launch it. I'll just start by introducing this idea of the say-do gap, which probably most people are familiar with. But the idea is that we as humans are very we're bad reflectors on ourselves. So what we think we may do is ultimately not necessarily what we will do, or we're just not honest with ourselves. So when it comes to certain attitudinal based research, that may not be as aligned to predictive kind of data as we'd hope. And in fact, there's a good reason for that. So 95% of brain activity is non-conscious, which ultimately the simple math is only 5% of our brain activity is rational, in the way we give ourselves a lot more credit for being highly rational creatures than we are. So making sure your research is set up to uncover the truth, not just kind of collect data. Well, I think there's both collecting data and then there's building intuition. And so I think the starting point, the best practice I would highly recommend is focusing on building your own intuition. And you can do this through just simply immersing it in the world around you. The more time you spend with prospective customers outside of your family and friend circle, I highly recommend that. It's easy for us to want to support those in our life. And so it may be harder to tap into the truth and kind of honest feedback if these people are kind of people you know and that you're representing kind of an idea enthusiastically. The other piece, kind of going back to that say do gap, is just observing behavior. You can go into any store and just see how shoppers approach a category that you're exploring, kind of entering. And you could just have impromptu conversations, ask open-ended questions. The more That's a hard thing to do, especially if you're passionate about the product that you've developed or the idea that you are developing. But ultimately, by being a good listener and holding yourself accountable to being open to listening well and not just trying to sell your idea to the respondents or the participants or the individuals that you're talking with, that will set you up for more success. You have to become a student of shopping and consumption behavior and motivations more than a salesperson for your idea when you're conducting research like this. And I think the other piece is just to accept the reality that it is highly likely you will need to pivot your idea to be successful. I've done over 1,000 research projects by some of the biggest brands, most savvy companies when it comes to research. And there is maybe on one hand, I can count the number of products that were ready to go right off the start. And so be ready to kind of listen and accept the reality that where you're starting in terms of your idea, you probably are going to need to do some tweaking, some adjusting, and figuring out to ultimately get it perfect and kind of ready to compete optimally. Another just kind of focus that often goes kind of underappreciated is just the role of packaging. Your packaging is your salesperson when your product makes it into market. And so what we see often is just the noise of a store shelf and how much friction there is for shoppers to kind of see, understand, and want products that they encounter at the shelf. And so the more work you do on making sure that that packaging is doing a great job of non-consciously communicating the awesomeness that it brings to the world, the more successful you'll be. The less friction there is when it comes to, again, that translation of product to shopper, the easier your kind of ramp up will be. And so by conducting immersive consumer research, using that example of like a farmer's market and those kind of genuine conversations, where you're listening as much as you're selling, it forms you and it equips you with this deep kind of this intuition that is just in you, and that empowers then every decision that you make going forward. I think ultimately what you're doing is you're transforming your thinking from here is me and what I want to here is what my core customer wants and what ultimately making decision that benefits them. There was a local coffee brand, actually a friend of mine's involved with this business, and they're in a number of different restaurants. Their coffee is great. So the product is not the problem. It's actually a huge asset. And they were successful in selling into kind of a local retailer, given they had unique style packaging. So instead of the normal kind of premium coffee package, they had something more in a stand-up pouch. And the thought that they had was that this different packaging would actually draw attention to it and kind of be part of the reason for their success once they got into retail, when in fact the opposite proved to be true, where because it was a different enough style pouch, shoppers at the speed of shopping, you have 3 seconds to kind of communicate to be seen, understood, and wanted. And what happened was this product was kind of deselected without shoppers even realizing they weren't considering it. And so that was a situation where this brand needed to do enough to be kind of similar to the category, and differentiate in ways other than just kind of this unusual package. Another example that comes to mind was a sustainability initiative where they had one of their kind of fresh poultry brands change their styrofoam foam packaging that to something that was more biodegradable, but it also looked a little bit more like cardboard. It looked a little bit more premium, but they didn't change the price. If anything, they're actually impacting their margins negatively, and they thought this would be a value add. Ultimately, these sustainable products actually struggle to sell the same amount as the styrofoam base because there was an assumption around value that wasn't actually true, meaning shoppers assumed it would be higher priced than it was at the speed of shopping. None of them were even aware that they were making that judgment in the moment, but ultimately, again, that's where our 95% subconscious thinking can play a huge role. So the more you can reduce friction when you're developing your product and making sure you're kind of gaining those nuanced learnings can, again, make the difference between success and failure, because these are two examples of great products that weren't translated at the speed of shopping. The first thing is, in the research phase, when you're kind of building this knowledge, is to seek the truth, not just data to support your ideas. Ultimately, the truth will win out when products become real and they're on store shelves. And if you've sought data just to support an idea versus seeking the truth, it may be possible that you'll invest a lot of money and time in something that ultimately is not set up for success. So have the humility to accept the knocks early and use research and learning in context to kind of make your product better and set itself up for success, so that ultimately when you're collecting that data, it does reflect this positive outcome that you'll ultimately see when it hits the shelves. And just another thing, and I've spoken about this a little bit, is just the idea is friction is death to products. So make sure you are easy to understand and use. If consumers are struggling to wrap their head around your product, so think about, like, if you need to do a lot of explaining to shoppers kind of more in that farmers market setting, then you need to do more work to fix your problem versus kind of just keep pointing at the consumer like, I can't believe they don't understand what this is. Take that as learning and apply it to make it more intuitive. Know your environment you will be competing in. What are the built-in assumptions that align to your product and what would be unexpected? So ultimately, products don't perform in a vacuum. So you can use that to your advantage by not needing to kind of educate shoppers on things they already would assume based on kind of being in a Whole Foods market, let's say. You don't have to communicate the value of organic to that shopper because they already assume that to be the case. And instead, focus on what makes you unique compared to your competitors. And then the last bit is, and this is a little bit the difference between in-store and e-commerce. So in-store, the focus should all be around showing more than saying, meaning use structure, color, and visuals to do a lot of your heavy lifting in terms of communicating to shoppers who you are, what you're about. Whereas in e-commerce, it's completely the opposite. It's all about word use and search engine optimization. So they require very different strategies to be successful. And so ultimately what we see a lot is online successes that are very successful in large part because of how they use words need to reinvent their approach to success to lean into more of the structure, color, and visuals of how they show up to make sure that they're translating the goodness of their product to shoppers at the speed of shopping.
I think that the conversation here was great today. Really appreciate it, and thank you for all of your insights.